Good evening, Brendan.
Good evening, Rex.
Today is October 23, 2020. Very significant day for you. I just visited you in your room and you're finishing off your packing, your bags. You're ready to go. And so this going home to Ireland would be for good, no?
I'm afraid so. I'm
Yes.
afraid so. No, there's a limit to our lives, and it doesn't do to pretend that there isn't.
So thank you. Thanks a lot for the time you spent here in the Philippines, your presence, your friendship, your relationship, your wisdom, many things. Many people have expressed that already.
Yeah.
But today we are here to talk about Tatay Bido,
Mhm.
Bishop Bienvenido Tudtud, the first prelate of Marawi. Because you see, we had a conversation once, and then in passing, you mentioned that Tatay Bido, or Bishop Tudtud, visited Ireland, visited your home,
Yeah.
and met your mother.
Mm.
And to me, it was a big realization. Oh, both of you are contemporaries, and you share some friendship. So this, I'd like to know more. Can you tell us how did you meet him? How come he visited you or your mother in Ireland?
Yeah. First of all, he visited my mother, but I wasn't there.
You were
No.
there. Okay.
And he visited my mother because at that time he was Bishop of Iligan and Marawi, meaning the diocese hadn't been divided up.
Mm.
So we're back there. And Cyril was teaching at the faculty. It was after a bad time when the Christians had to run away, and because things were bad for a while. And then he was asked to step in to and then since the Christians had actually left, then they said maybe you can be chaplain to the Christians who are at the university,
MSU.
in the meantime until they come back, type of thing. So he went along to the university, and they were rather cold about the whole thing, and then they said, well, what qualifications do you have? So he said, well, I have MA from Oxford University in human geography. I said, human geography? Would you like to teach human geography? Nobody had even after the thing. So he had an in now, I know, in terms of for the students also. But he would have been in that moment, at that particular time now, prior to the break, the separation of Marawi from Iligan, yeah, and the conversation with Paul VI.
Yes.
Prior to that, he would have been the bishop of
Iligan.
when he made that trip to Ireland, every single Columban, Irish Columban, who had been had been serving in the thing, he visited the home of every single one of them.
Wow. Amazing, even just that.
Yeah. So
Wow.
my mother was just one among many who were visited by him. Now, I don't think, I'm not even sure that Cyril was at home at that time, but because he was in Marawi, because then he was going to go and it was
That's
so
amazing.
beautiful, and everybody, of course, was enormously blown over that the bishop would come all the way to tell them how their son was doing it was beautiful. It was just marvelous. But he had such a capacity for putting everybody completely at their ease, It was just a presence that you couldn't help but be drawn in, to conversations. It's just an extraordinary human being, really, really extraordinary. But so that's the background to that particular story, But my mother was really bowled over. Yeah, just a delightful man, Delaga, and true. Yeah.
And you worked in Mindanao, no? For how many years?
Well, I only came to Mindanao, like working in 19. I got back to the Philippines from Australia, where after 4 years in the seminary there, and I had been asked by Charlie to come back because the bishops wanted a new project to get underway, and it was to be this St. Mary's Theologate, because Davao, they were really upset because Davao was the only centre and was refusing to take more than a quota from the diocese. They were saying, we have all of these people here and they won't accept them. And so then they got together and they thought, supposing we set up one of our own, and yeah, that would be the right thing to do. And this is what happened then. But then they came to the Columbans and say, will you sort of help us to get this off the ground? And the truth was that the Columbans had never been in priestly formation. The Vincentians and others had, but the Columbans never did that, sort of had up to this point, you know. So this was a big shock to everybody. So I said, well, if that's what the Regent thinks should be done, okay. So that brought me up on the 1st of January 1980.
1980.
I arrived into Manila again and down south. Yeah. So that was the beginning of 10 years then stint with Peter, and who else helped out in the early years? Sean McNulty and Warren Kinney and Joe Hargadon, who was over in Iligan. He would come over and take care of the canon law, and Joe was pretty sharp on canon law. So we would have been lost really if we didn't have the help of those two at the very beginning. But Joe Maghinay of Ozamis, he was to be. The Columban said, we will provide the academic side of it, but the formation has to be in the hands of the local clergy, the diocesan clergy, you know. And that was a very important distinction to make, because you see, all kinds of reasons we weren't trained or skilled to be in this thing. We were capable of handling the academic side of it and so on, and the theology, and so, but the actual values and formation and training and so on, that had to be in the hands of people. Yeah,
but in your case, you were brought in touch in the Mindanao scenery or in the Philippine church and so on. And would you remember the first time that you met this Bishop Tudtud?
Well,
Tatay Bido.
I think it would have been the very first time that Peter and I met with all of the bishops together for it was 3 or 4 days, you know. And we had somebody facilitating it. I think it was a Canadian sister, but she was just facilitating, or supposed to be facilitating the thing. And then so Zafra was from Bishop Zafra was from what's the northern diocese, up from Nozamis. Dipolog. Yeah. So Dipolog, no, and then Ozamis, no, and then Pagadian, and then across the bay Iligan, and then Marawi, and there was to be a sixth, but the Jesuit bishop in Ipil, who initially was going to join it, then he thought again about it, and he thought maybe not. So in fact it was 5. We ended up with Dopim,
Dopim.
D-O-P-I-M, yes. Yeah. So he found another solution for his place. Yeah. So that was the beginnings of it. But at that meeting for 3 or 4 days, it was interesting. But they were saying, okay, so how long can you people commit for, you know? And they were thinking in terms of, you know, like
decades.
No. They were thinking realistically in terms of 3 or 4 years type of thing, you know. So I think it was Peter who said, well, we can give it 10 years. No, that was a. They were looking amazed and all that, but they were delighted. I was going to go on.
Yes.
Now Peter had already set up the centre for the training of the
5-week seminar.
5-week seminar and all of that, and he's a very good teacher and a very good inspirer of
for lay formation, no? Basically.
And so he had all of that stuff behind him,
and on that day with the bishops was Bishop Tudtud in that group.
Yes.
And then was there a special, or what I mean, impression you had on him on that time? Did you have a conversation?
I had picked up the kind of person he was already, and he could be very quiet, but he was always like half smiling to himself all the time, like he was just happy to be there, kind of thing, So he made everybody feel kind of equally relaxed and glad to be there, But it wasn't that he never hugged the microphone, or he absolutely never did anything like that, no. But he would just drop a comment or here or there of appreciation, and so made all the difference, because you see the others were scared stiff, and well, not all, I shouldn't say they all, but one of them I know was afraid that, oh my goodness, we wouldn't be able to keep up the standards of doctrinal correctness and all of this, all kinds of stuff, and especially when I started telling them the kind of philosophy we were going to be building on, like I could see panic on this person's face, but the others, it's not fair to name names like that, but one man would always go to sleep about 7 minutes after a meeting started,
Okay. Heavy.
But he was the oldest of the group, But so you didn't expect that there was going to be any great challenge coming from it. But then the others had to sort of calm the fears of this man who was afraid that, this was sounded very threatening and very this, that, and the other, and so on. So that they more or less said okay, and then there was a question which wasn't on anybody's mind before, but we, because of what Peter had been into in terms of lay enablement and so on, and lay leadership and so on, saying, and could lay people also attend, and say, oh, well, that would be a little bit tricky, or that would be a little bit difficult. I said, well, supposing we have 2 different institutes here, one is the seminary, and then the other is the Center for Culture and Theology, and anybody can attend lectures under that heading type of thing. So this was agreed to, but it was when the word got out, and many of the local clergy in the different dioceses were really upset. The idea that lay people would be allowed to do theology, that was, but someone like Benny sitting there, like great, like everything was great. but to tell you the truth, my impression of him, at that time and in all subsequent years that we were there, my impression of him was quite simply, I had never in my life met a human being as really free as this person. In other words, a person who was completely, what's the right word? Completely uncaring about how others saw him or how others think, because he was just going to be himself anyway, and same with his thinking, and the same with his judgments, and the same with everything that he would share. He would never be forceful, he would never push it on, but on the other hand, there was absolutely no way that he was going to change his perception, because others couldn't go along with it, So this calls for an unbelievable personal integrity and development in any human being to be able to do this. In other words, most of us start out and we are sociocentric, and we're always looking over our shoulder at what the others might or might not think, and what will be acceptable and what will not be acceptable, and pleasing people, etc., etc. And he was completely free. But I mean, this is incredible, because you see, it means that he is free to be himself, and it stops there. In other words, he's not going to be manipulated by anybody. He's not going to be blocked by anybody, because he's his own person.
Himself, yeah.
He's his own person, and then his thinking and his perception, that is what has struck you when you met him. Like you said to yourself, within what horizon is this person thinking? Because everybody has a horizon, and the trouble is, your horizon is the limit of your world.
Yes.
This is the danger and the problem for everybody. You see, that we think that we don't have a limited horizon, but we do, and therefore we're not. But you see, the person who succeeds in pushing the horizon, and in the end, like, I know I'm quoting somebody else at this moment, but it captures accurately what he is, yeah. And he is saying, "My horizon," this is the quote now. "My horizon is the limit of my world," yeah. Again, then the real horizon is in fact everything. Yeah? And only the person whose horizon coincides with the real can
Yes, exactly.
can think and the judgment and the fear. And I felt this man is one of the very few whose horizon is the universe. The whole thing is absolutely there. Yeah.
And he loves photography. And
he loved photography, but he loved photography because it enabled him to see the wonder of things more likely. It wasn't a hobby or something like that, So even with regard to people now, he would just be looking and marveling at somebody, side face or thing, and he wouldn't photograph people when they were looking at the camera. It would be a study, It would be a study of the person when they were actually doing something else, He really, it was something very different, And I mean, to be able to capture what was distinctive about this human being, like all of the great portrait artists, of our world, excelled in capturing in one line what was unique, and now it's an incredible gift, like, and very few artists are brilliant draftspeople, but it's something the same in the field of photography, he wouldn't be interested in color, for example, yeah.
So
because it doesn't help you to capture the essential. I would think there was my favorite Swedish filmmaker way back when I was young, and never worked in color until he was about 55 years old, but all of his earlier movies were in black and white, but he had a brilliant cameraman again now, and so anyway, forget him, but still it's still connected, like what he was doing with the camera again now was not what other people are doing with
not
the camera. It had everything to do with just capturing the uniqueness of a person.
I mentioned his photography because I think in passing in our conversation, you said that he once had this picture or photograph, and then he blew it up into a poster.
Yes.
And what was in that photo?
Yeah, there were two. You saw the sort of the back of two boots. You know,
Two boots.
really worn, and so on, and leather boots. Now, most people are in Signelas most of the time, but I think he was picking up on Vincent van Gogh, and he made a painting of just two boots, old worn boots, you know, and the boots captured the whole life story of the person who had worn them. You know? He just sort of managed to paint them in such a way that you realized that everything actually happened through these boots, you know, for this person, you know. Now, that's what he was. He picked up. The whole world has seen that particular one by Vincent, that particular thing. But now he, against a natural background, but black and white again now.
Okay,
right?
okay.
Black and white, and then he had this little few lines down down one side of the thing. Like if it was black and white, then this was in white against the picture. Yeah, and it was when you approach another people, be sure to take off your shoes, because the God in whose name you are coming has been there long before you. Oh my! That was it. That was the thing. I know. And others see that, because I think I don't know if it survived the fire in Marawi. I know later on. Paul said, did he actually see it himself, or did he hear about it?
Well, maybe he knew the
or maybe
quote.
there are multiple copies.
Or maybe yes, because even that quote, that understand, because we are missionaries, we did see it somewhere, sometime, that the place is sacred.
Yes, yeah.
So
the Columbans. I mean, the Columbans would have been exposed to the expression. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
But he decided to make it into a visual as well. That's much more impactful.
That really says something about how he looks at mission, no? Yeah. And you see, my problem was this is the year of ecumenism, interreligious dialogue, and indigenous peoples.
Oh.
And all I know about Tatay Bido was his association with Christian-Muslim dialogue. Yeah. And then I said, in what way can we relate him to the indigenous peoples? This is before I read or heard about what Carl Gaspar said, that in fact he started introduced into our church, the Catholic Church, the indigenous peoples Sunday celebration. Yeah. And that he was the head of MSPC. And that anyway, in passing also, you mentioned about his inclusivity. I mean, his all-embracing vision, so that actually with the Lumad, it's just so natural or automatic for him to embrace them as well.
Well, I never found out or had a chance to figure out when exactly he came to such insights, because they weren't obviously circulating in the Bishops' Conference. They weren't available, at that. So, I was often wondering where and did he figure out all of these themes, because he was so much at home with what he was talking about and the vision he had of what it meant to be church, that it I don't know, but he had it. He must have had it for a long time, and he couldn't have got it in his seminary years because it wasn't available, right? So somehow,
that's
he
a mystery.
Working it out in his own head, like exactly what we should be in terms of being church, you know, in relation to our whole world and its complex ways. And at the same time, like, maybe people were already beginning in the 60s, late 60s and 70s, to read people like Luzbetak and his cultural approach to mission and everything else, you know. But he already seemed to have that, you know, like as if he had come to it himself, you know, prior to that moment, you know, of thing. So I was always fascinated, but he would then turn up. Marifé also, Marifé Mendoza.
Yes, the sister. Yeah.
When he went to Rome and got the go ahead from Paul VI to leave the diocese of Leuven and just be the man in Marawi and Prelature of Marawi, exactly. That was an extraordinary move, and everybody thought he was totally mad. No, frankly, everybody, meaning in clerical circles. No, I don't mean.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, the furthest thing in the world from anybody's mind. In other words, you know, in most for not all, but for many of the people. So, like, not even on the horizon, so to speak. But, you know, and of course, the straight question that Paul VI answered was, who in heaven's name will go there? You know? And of course, Benny just said, I will. I said, okay, if you will, we'll do it. We'll do this. But he wasn't sent. He just volunteered. The richness of Christian and otherwise of the diocese as it was, and just go into this no man's land with what view?
With what horizon?
The whole point was, you see, that when you think about it, the church, looking at it historically, in its Spanish form, did a dreadful disservice to this particular part of the Philippines, precisely by, again, totally denigrating, you know, anything to do with the Moros, you know, because their experience, you know, in Spain, you know, which had just been worked out in the previous century, you know, and then they come round the world and say, oh my God, they're here. And of course, like, it was really slanderous, you know, thing. But obviously it wasn't perceived in those terms by the people involved. But the point of the matter was, there was no respect and no openness and nothing possibly good that could be said in relation to. Now, I don't know at what stage of his studies and career that he decided this narrative is a disaster, you know, but nevertheless it's the one that shaped the next 3 centuries, you know, in terms of Catholic attitudes and so on, and so created a dreadful divisive barrier for one thing, but it got worse, of course, because once you come to see people as enemy, and once you see them, then you have no qualms about, you know, attacking them in all kinds of ways, etc., etc. So he grasped the culpability of the church in regard to creating what was a very, very difficult and for both parties to live without killing each other, etc. With the levels of enmity that were being generated precisely now by the church's way of seeing these people. Now, there were a handful of very tiny handful of people, even connected to Spain and Catalan. One, his name was Raymond Lull, L-U-L-L. This is way back, I know. But he was he was a layman, and he was married, and he had a family, and so on. but he was a sort of a mystic also, you know. And he got obsessed with this idea of he was going to go on mission to the Moros. No, this is this is
Yes, at the height
when
of
at the height of them taking over more than 2/3 of the whole of Spain. You know? And he and everybody said, "Well, you just get killed. That's stupid." but Raman, he just dreamt of doing this all his life, and no, he actually he wouldn't have been able to make a handle of it. But the point was he wrote and he talked and he did all sorts of things. But so there has always been people in whom the spirit was so alive that they could see that we're doing something really wrong here. You know, we are failing to respect. You know, like nobody had a thought that the spirit could possibly be active in anybody except a Catholico. So but the trouble is, and when you knew it, the spirit has been sent ab initio. So there never was a time in the world when people weren't in fact under the drawing power of the love of the spirit. So it wasn't like, oh well, the word became flesh and that no. The three who are crazy about us, they are involved from the first moment, that they are involved totally, and therefore, but none of that had been articulated or thought about, except for, I say, a handful of unbelievably deep, mystic type people.
So you think Bishop Tudtud is a mystic type?
I honestly think that he had a contemplative gift that enabled him to see at a level of depth, when things were wrong and why they are wrong, and so that long before you had a lot of books written about interreligious dialogue, he had it already. He had it already that it isn't a matter of going out and converting everybody, it's a matter of genuinely sharing, religious experience, and in that way, again, a convergence of religious faith traditions, in service again of what God wants for God's creation and for human beings in particular. I have come that they may be one human family. It never has happened. It never has happened, like all the time that we are on this earth,
the wars and the divisions.
So exactly, and just killing each other, or wanting to lord it over each other, or enslaving each other, but refusing to accept that we are all flesh and blood people, and loving each other as such, and so like he had that so clearly in his head, but you see, if you have that vision. And if you have, as you say, that's your horizon now, is the whole thing, this immense journey that we refer to as the creation thing. So we say, it's 13.7 billion years in the making, and we are a part of it, But then you have to, if you want to be life-giving for the planet, and if you want to be part of God's creation in the way God intended us to be, then your horizon has to be
to embrace the whole, everything, the whole.
Yeah.
And just for the local specific question here in the Philippines, you see, next year is our celebration of the 500 years of Christianity. So the Filipino church, the Filipino communities are now looking forward. How to move forward? What's the way forward? You see, in your own mind or imagination, if Bishop Tudtud were here with us, how would he see this? How to bring our Philippine church forward to the next 500 years? Do you have some kind of approximation?
Simply that obviously I can only work on the glimpses I have into him from that earlier period now,
Yes.
you know, and then this sad and abrupt way that took us all, totally shocked everybody, because you know, he was always giving retreats, and now he goes up to Baguio to give yet another to the things, and it was devastating for people in so many ways.
Yes.
You know, in other words, first of all, the crash was so total that what people at least can hold on to was that they find some remains type of thing wasn't possible. You know? That I could see from the agony and pain in people, his friends and the people around him, that was really the hardest thing of all. That like somehow if you have some remains, you know, you can mourn and have closure, but it's terrible when you don't, you know. It really is terrible.
Yes.
And that it happened like that, so everybody was devastated for a long time, you know, and so it was worse than grief because of the way in which everything happened, you know. And but so I'm no reader of minds or so, and so all I'm saying is that on the strength of what he already had reached, you know, and the vision out of which he was operating, what would he be sort of giving central thing to? And just in virtue of the kind of presence he was for other people and all other people,
Yes,
you know,
yes, everyone.
that he clearly put everybody at their ease, but it was more than that. He mediated, he communicated to them an extraordinary reverence, you know, for the person they were. I know it's not a right, it doesn't sound like a great word to be putting in there, reverence, but I mean, people felt treasured. People felt, you know, that they were of real, irreplaceable value, you know. And he would talk to them in ways of encouraging them and this, that and the other, and they would suddenly realize, this person is taking me seriously. No, seriously. Now, I mean, you might say, no, this is rare. It is rare that we give people our full and total attention. It is rare that we focus on them and not on what I'm going to say next, etc. He made everybody feel precious and valuable and capable of God knows what. That's what I meant by saying reverence, you know.
Yes.
What God alone knows what you are capable of doing, you know. So have the courage to be yourself, you know. Have the courage to be, you know. And so people really came alive and encountered.
I heard
with this
stories.
person.
Yes.
As I'm sure you had many stories, but this is the thing, you see, that he communicated something of the fact that they are the product of indefeasible love, that they exist because they are madly loved by God, you know? And that somehow it's very hard for anybody to believe this. And somebody who can make us believe it, simply by the way they address us and are with us. This is miraculous stuff, you know. I mean, frankly, when we use that language, but this is who he was. You know? This is an incredible human being who affirmed the life in everybody else.
And changed the life of
and
the
it changed
person.
of course it changed their life, because now they came free, you know, in the way in which he was free. You know, it's like that.
Infecting them with his freedom.
Yeah. But back to your question, like, you know,
next 500 years.
What would he be saying, you know, at this moment, you know? And I think that all the themes that were precious to him, you know, all the as you say, the vision within which he was living out his ministry and his Christianity in the world was, as you say, inclusive. That I mean, there was it wasn't a rivalistic thing. It wasn't about getting people into the church no. It was about being present to the lives of everybody else, you know, even though you weren't very deeply aware of the deep meanings of their faith tradition and where they're coming from and so on. But you know that God was always there, you know, and so on. He would say that we would have to transcend the legacy of the historically understandable Spanish take on things and the harm that it did to any possible mutually enriching future for the peoples in the Philippines, because you see, once you set up this enmity and this completely negative image of people, you destroy. I mean,
imported enmity.
Yes, yeah. As I said earlier, the horror when they said, "Oh my God, we've come all the way around the world, and they're here again." You know, so essentially, it was like we would have to precisely to be what God wants us to be as Christians, and in the meaning of our faith for the life of the world. You know, we would have to not just overcome, but reverse that moment in our history, and in our understanding of our own faith also, and come to realize we've been challenged to something much more for the life of the world. We are being challenged much more, than simply saving my soul or so on. No, the task and what you were born for, as is spelled out in our baptism, was, do you know who you are? You are someone who has been given one glorious chance to live and die into and for your world. And so if we could get that right, then we might be encouraged to be for the world and for history what God wants us to be. So I would say that's the agenda.
Thanks a lot. I just heard the bell for dinner.
Okay.
And then thank you. My heart is full. John, you can affirm that too. And we all wish you the best. You're going home tonight. What time is your flight tonight?
20 after midnight.
20 after. So keep safe. Bon voyage, Brendan.
Okay.
God loves you. God loves us all. And Tatay Bido is an inspiration tonight. And you have really allowed us to see a deeper insight of his person and his way
Tatay
of thinking.
Bido is an inspiration forever. Not just for tonight.
Not just for tonight, but thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay, let's go.
Wait, thank